Hi, thank you so much for coming in today. I am so excited to talk about Jared and the phenomenal progress that he has made so far this year. So, welcome to second grade again. Thank you for coming in. And first, I just want to start and tell you how much I appreciate having Jared in my class. He is so much fun to be around, and he has such a positive spirit that he brings into the class. And he's able to be playful and tease his peers in like a positive way, and it's just fun to see him interact with other people. And I know that you're aware that he has some struggles in other academic areas, especially with literacy, just between working with me and the literacy coach. But I am so impressed with the progress that he's made, and I am so proud of him for persevering and really being willing to dive into these difficult concepts and these lessons. And he always is willing to try his hardest and just get involved, and he's not afraid to ask for help when he needs it, but he also is very aware of where he's at, and he'll really try his hardest and only ask for help when it's really necessary. So I'm so excited to talk about the progress that he has made this year. So the focus of this meeting is to talk about mostly his literacy development, because that is the area that he struggles the greatest with. I think that's the area that we need to focus on. So in order to gauge where my students are at, I give them all assessments. And this just lets me know as the teacher that they're reading on the right level, or they're where they're at, or it lets me look at the areas that they struggle with, the areas that we need to work on as a whole class versus the areas that I need to teach this group of students or this group of students. So these assessments are very standard, and it's just to help me know where my students are at and help me help them, really, so that I know what instructions to give and I know how to teach them. So one of the assessments that I gave Jared recently is called a running record. And for this assessment, students read a book that is familiar to them. And so usually, to get the students familiar with this book, I read the book with them during their guided reading time, which is where it's a group of readers that are all on the same level working directly with me. So I choose a book that's on their instructional level, and as we read it, any mistakes they make, whether it's pronunciation or how they read it, if they miss punctuation, whatever it is, I'm right there to help them, and I say, let's try this word again, and we look at all those errors. So as we go through the whole book, they hear everything pronounced correctly, read with good prosody, read with good fluency, so they've heard the book and are familiar with it. And so after this initial read through of the book, they've heard everything they need to know for this test. And so also, as we read, I ask them comprehension questions just to make sure that they understand what the book is about and they get the gist of the story, because this will also help them with their decoding skills. They can kind of predict which word is coming because they're aware of what's going on in the story. So usually within that same week, I have the students reread the book to me, and this time I just listen, and I can't help them. If they mess up something, it's their responsibility to fix it. I can't point it out to them. And I just mark as we go whether or not the students got the words right or wrong. So the paper that I fill out looks like this, and it will have the title of the book, and it has every single word of the book written out for me. And as they read, I just follow along and I check whether they got it right or wrong. And if they got it wrong, I usually just put a slash through the word and write what they said above it. Otherwise, I just put a check if they got it correct. And I chose this assessment for Jared because I think it's one that teaches a really good habit of good readers, which is correcting yourself. For this assessment, if they mess up a word, for example, if they're reading and they say tap, and then they read the next word and then they go back and say, oh wait, that says tape, and then they say tape, I don't count that word against them. They corrected it themselves, which shows me that they're aware of how to actually read it. And I just think that's a very valuable skill to have as a reader. So I really like that this test implements that inside of it, because I know sometimes I am up there reading in front of the class and I totally mess up a word or a sentence, and I realize that it didn't make sense, and I go back and fix it. And so I model that behavior in the classroom. So I think it's important for them to pick up on that and then be able to implement that in their own reading when they're all by themselves. And so that's what a running record is essentially. And I just think that's really valuable. for them. So the other assessment that I used is called the Core Phonics Survey. And so it has all these different sections on it. And basically this assessment allows me to identify his letter recognition skills, whether it's capital or lowercase, his reading and decoding skills, if he can see certain patterns that we practice in the classroom, and if he can hear certain sounds that he should be aware of, like B says the B sound, stuff like that. So it's pretty basic, but it's things that are really important and essential to being a good reader. And lastly, it also lets me gauge his spelling skills. So I'll say words to him, and he has to listen for those sounds and think about which letters make those sounds and be able to write those correctly. So this test has a lot of different sections, but it breaks it down into smaller mini sections so that I can pinpoint exactly where he needs help and what areas need the most attention. And so I just want to talk to you about what kind of things I learned from these assessments about Jared's literacy development and how he's doing. So from his running record, I was able to see that usually he just gets caught up in trying to read through really fast. And that messes him up because he'll look at the first letter, first couple letters of a word, and he'll try and predict what the rest of the word is. And it doesn't always make sense, and he doesn't always go back and self-correct. He did have some self-correction, so I was really happy that that is becoming a habit for him. But yeah, I mostly saw that that was an issue. He was just trying to read really fast and didn't read the rest of the word or the word in its entirety. And then for the second assessment, I learned a lot about Jared and his ability to decode and spell and hear different phonemes from it. So I noticed that he often got his lowercase B's and D's mixed up, which is very common. At this point in second grade, it's not as common, so that is an area of concern for me. So I'm trying to work on that with him, and we're focusing just on those letters and differentiating them. I also noticed that he struggles at identifying vowel sounds. Not so much what the vowel name is, because he could look at an A and say, oh, that's the letter A, but he couldn't tell me in certain words if it was an ah sound or an A sound. And in class, we work on phonics every single day, and this program teaches the students different digraphs and patterns that they can look through, like consonant, vowel, consonant, for example. And by learning these different parts of a word, students are usually able to be very successful in decoding and reading fluently. And I noticed that Jared, he does a great job at identifying consonant sounds, and he can identify individual sounds that each letter makes. So we go through the whole alphabet, and he can go, that's the letter S, it makes the S sound. So he's really good at doing those different things. My concern was his ability to identify the vowels, which vowel sound to use in a word. So, for example, on this test, there are words that follow a CVC pattern, like sip or cat, and Jared read sip as sipe. So that showed me that he wasn't aware that the pattern influences how he says that I sound. So I know that that's something that we need to work on. And also in this test, it gives them pseudo words, so fake made up words, but they follow the certain pattern. And he really struggled at applying those patterns to these made up words. So he did really well on the first section where it was real words that he had seen, but then applying those different rules to new words, he really struggled with, which doesn't really super concern me because they are made up words, so I get that it kind of probably just confused him. But it is important that he can recognize those patterns so that he can apply them to unfamiliar words. So we're definitely going to work on that. And then he also struggled with multisyllabic words, and he'd get a little flustered, and he'd read the first few letters and then kind of guess what the rest of the word is. And that's exactly what I noticed with his running record. So I know that because of that, I just need to give him direct instruction on looking at the whole entire word and not just guessing what it is, but really thinking about what sounds those different letters make and how to read those words. So in a book that talks about literacy development by Tompkins, it talks about the importance of using explicit instruction when teaching phonics, and because that's most beneficial to students and that's what they respond to best. So I came up with an explicit lesson plan for Jared, and we look at individual parts of words and we work on breaking them apart and then blending them back together. And what I saw during this lesson is that Jared does a phenomenal job at sounding out individual letters effortlessly, and he can blend them back together easily too. So for example, one of the words we looked at was map, and Jared has to tell me all the sounds that he hears. So he goes ah, p, and then he blends that whole word together and says map. So that's really useful for them, and they can see the individual parts of the word and the importance that each letter has in the word. And so I think that's a great skill to have, and I think this will help him with those words that he struggles with. He just needs to really look at the individual sounds and blend them together to create those longer words that he really struggles with. So when he slowed down and sounded them out letter by letter to determine which vowel sound it was, he was really successful. So I think getting him to slow down and look at those individual letters is what is most important for Jared. So as the teacher, I will continue to explicitly teach Jared different techniques for decoding, such as segmenting and blending, like I just talked about. And I'll also give him direct instructions on different things to look at in a word, like the magic E that changes tap to tape and makes the vowel say its name. Simple things like that that will just help him pronounce words correctly. And at home, it would be great if you could just read with him and take turns switching off who reads, but make sure as you, the parent, are reading, he's following along with his finger. This will just help him connect the sounds that he's hearing to the letters that he's seeing on the page. And that will just be a great help to him in knowing when it's a long vowel sound versus a short vowel sound. And every day we go to the library, and it's a leveled library, so students check out books that are on their grade, that are on their level, based on where I benchmark them. So based on what I've seen through assessments and through reading with them and interactions with them. And so Jared has access to these books, and so if you could just go through them with him and help him, that would be great. Overall, Jared is headed in the right direction. He isn't quite on grade level or where I want him to be right now, but he has made so much progress this year, and I'm really, really proud of his efforts. And I'm confident that with my help and with the literacy coach's help, he'll get to where he needs to be. So yeah, if you could just keep encouraging him to read those take-home library books and get new ones and continually read with him, that would be amazing, and I know that that would be a great help to him. I will also send home some phonics games with Jared that he can work on whenever he wants to, just for some extra practice in practicing the long versus short vowel sounds. Other than that, I have no concerns at this time. Jared is a great student. I love how hardworking he is and how willing he is to just jump in on our lessons and tackle the task at hand. He's a great kid, and he's so much fun to be around, and I am so glad that he is in my class. So thank you so much for coming today, and I look forward to seeing you again.